Charlotte Hayes was a name that resonated in the world of fashion. At just 29 years old, she had built a thriving career as a fashion designer in New York City. Her designs had graced the runways of Paris and Milan, and her latest collection had just won her the prestigious Designer of the Year award. To the outside world, Charlotte seemed to have it all: a successful career, a beautiful apartment in Manhattan, and a fiancé, Ryan Carter, who was a rising star in the legal world. But beneath the surface, her life was about to unravel. It all started on a rainy Tuesday evening. Charlotte had just returned home from a long day at her studio, her mind buzzing with ideas for her next collection. She was greeted by the sight of Ryan's briefcase on the kitchen counter and the faint sound of his voice coming from the bedroom. Smiling, she walked toward the room, ready to share the good news about a new collaboration offer she had received. But as she opened the door, her world came crashing down. Ryan was not alone. Sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing softly, was Olivia Brooks, Charlotte's best friend since college. The two froze when they saw her, their guilty expressions confirming what Charlotte's heart already knew. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the sound of the rain tapping against the windows. Then, Ryan began to stammer out an explanation, but Charlotte didn't need to hear it. The betrayal was written all over their faces. The days that followed were a blur of pain and disbelief. Charlotte learned that Ryan and Olivia had been seeing each other for over a year, their affair hidden behind the facade of friendship and trust. But the betrayal didn't stop there. Ryan had been quietly working to gain control of Charlotte's fashion brand, using legal loopholes to position himself as a co-owner. Olivia, who had always been by Charlotte's side as her confidant, had been feeding him information about the business. Charlotte felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her. The people she had trusted most had not only broken her heart, but also threatened to destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. For days she stayed in her apartment, avoiding calls and emails, unable to face the world. But as the initial shock began to fade, a new emotion took its place: determination. She realized she couldn't let Ryan and Olivia win. She couldn't let their betrayal define her. So she made a decision. She would leave New York, at least for a while, and give herself the space to heal. She booked a one-way ticket to Las Vegas, a city she had never visited but had always been curious about. It was a place of reinvention, a city where people went to escape their pasts and start anew, and that was exactly what Charlotte needed. On the morning of her flight, Charlotte packed a single suitcase with her favorite pieces, clothes she had designed herself, sketchbooks filled with ideas, and a few personal mementos. As she closed the door to her apartment, she felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. New York had been her home for years, but it was also the place where her heart had been broken. She needed to leave it behind, at least for now. The flight to Las Vegas was uneventful, giving Charlotte time to reflect on everything that had happened. She thought about the moments she had ignored the red flags, the times Ryan had been distant or Olivia had seemed overly interested in her business. She had been so focused on her work, so determined to succeed, that she hadn't seen what was happening right in front of her. But that was going to change. She promised herself that this trip would be the start of something new, a chance to rediscover who she was and what she wanted. As the plane descended over the glittering lights of Las Vegas, Charlotte felt a flicker of hope. The city stretched out before her, a kaleidoscope of neon and possibility. She didn't know what she would find there, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of excitement. This was her chance to start over, to leave the pain of the past behind and create a new future for herself. Charlotte stepped off the plane and into the warm desert air, her suitcase in hand and her heart open to whatever lay ahead. Little did she know, her decision to come to Las Vegas would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. The first night in Las Vegas was unlike anything Charlotte had ever experienced. The city was alive, buzzing with energy that seemed to pulse through the streets. Neon lights illuminated the skyline, and the sound of laughter, music, and slot machines filled the air. Charlotte checked into a boutique hotel just off the strip, a place that promised luxury and privacy, exactly what she needed. After unpacking her suitcase, she decided to explore the city. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew she couldn't spend the night alone in her room, drowning in her thoughts. Dressed in a sleek black dress she had designed herself, Charlotte made her way to the hotel's rooftop bar. The space was elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. She ordered a glass of wine and found a quiet corner to sit, letting the atmosphere wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. The city's chaos was oddly comforting, a reminder that life went on, no matter how broken she felt. It was then that she noticed him. Across the bar, leaning casually against the counter, was a man who seemed out of place in the glitzy surroundings. He was tall, with dark hair that was slightly tousled, as though he had run his hands through it one too many times. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, but there was an air of dishevelment about him, as if he had just come from a long day and needed a drink to unwind. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, scanned the room before landing on Charlotte. Their eyes met, and for a moment the noise of the bar seemed to fade. Charlotte quickly looked away, feeling a flush of embarrassment. She wasn't here to meet anyone. She was here to escape, to find herself again. But before she could retreat further into her thoughts, the man approached her table. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth, with a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. Charlotte hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Sure." He sat down across from her, setting his drink of whiskey neat on the table. "You don't look like you're from around here," he said, studying her with a curious expression. "I'm not," Charlotte replied, taking a sip of her wine. "Just visiting." "Same here," he said, offering a small smile. "I'm Elliot, by the way. Elliot Grayson." "Charlotte," she said, returning the smile. "Charlotte Hayes." For the next hour, they talked. At first, the conversation was light. Where they were from, what brought them to Las Vegas. Charlotte learned that Elliot was originally from San Francisco, but had spent the last few years traveling for work. He didn't go into much detail about his job, and Charlotte didn't press him. She wasn't ready to share her own story, so she understood his reluctance. But as the night went on, their conversation grew deeper. Charlotte found herself opening up in a way she hadn't expected. She told Elliot about her career, her love for fashion, and how she had built her brand from the ground up. She didn't mention Ryan or Olivia, but she hinted at the betrayal that had brought her to Las Vegas. Elliot listened intently, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "I know what it's like to feel like the ground has been ripped out from under you," he said quietly. "To lose trust in the people you thought would always have your back." Charlotte looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "What happened?" she asked. Elliot hesitated, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Let's just say I've had my share of betrayals. People who wanted to use me for what I could give them, not for who I am." There was a weight to his words, a pain that Charlotte recognized. She didn't press him for more details, sensing that he wasn't ready to share. Instead, she nodded, letting him know she understood. As the night wore on, the bar began to empty, but neither of them made a move to leave. There was something about Elliot that made Charlotte feel at ease, as though she could let her guard down for the first time in weeks. And there was something about Charlotte that intrigued Elliot, something he couldn't quite put into words. Then, out of nowhere, Elliot said something that caught Charlotte completely off guard. "Let's get married." Charlotte blinked, certain she had misheard him. "What?" "Let's get married," Elliot repeated, his expression serious. "Right now. Tonight." Charlotte stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or be offended. "You're joking." "I'm not," Elliot said, leaning forward. "Think about it. You're here to start over, right? To leave the past behind? So am I. What better way to do that than to take a leap of faith?" Charlotte shook her head, laughing softly. "That's insane. We just met." "Exactly," Elliot said, a small smile playing on his lips. "We don't have any baggage, no expectations, just two people who need a fresh start." Charlotte opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat. A part of her wanted to say no, to walk away and forget this conversation ever happened. But another part of her, the part that was tired of playing it safe, tired of being hurt, was tempted. What did she have to lose? Her life in New York was already in shambles. Maybe this was exactly what she needed. "Okay," she said finally, surprising herself as much as Elliot. "Let's do it." Elliot's smile widened, and for the first time that night, Charlotte felt a flicker of excitement. They left the bar and hailed a cab, heading to one of the city's famous wedding chapels. The drive was a blur of neon lights and laughter, the kind of reckless joy that Charlotte hadn't felt in years. The ceremony was quick and simple, with a cheerful officiant and a bouquet of fake flowers. As they exchanged vows, Charlotte couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. But when Elliot slipped the ring onto her finger and looked into her eyes, she felt something shift. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. After the ceremony, they returned to the hotel, still riding the high of their impulsive decision. Charlotte didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Little did she know, her new husband was hiding secrets that would soon turn her world upside down. The morning after their spontaneous wedding, Charlotte woke up to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the hotel room's curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The events of the previous night felt like a dream. Meeting Elliot, their whirlwind connection, and the impulsive decision to get married. But the weight of the simple gold band on her finger reminded her that it was all very real. Elliot was already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked calm, almost contemplative, as he stared out at the city below. When he noticed Charlotte stirring, he turned to her with a small smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Grayson," he said, his voice warm and teasing. Charlotte sat up, brushing her hair out of her face. "Good morning," she replied, her tone uncertain. The reality of what they had done was starting to sink in. "So, what now?" Elliot set his coffee down and walked over to sit on the edge of the bed. "Now we figure out what this means," he said, his expression serious. "I know last night was unconventional, to say the least, but I meant what I said. I think this could be the start of something good for both of us." Charlotte studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity, but Elliot's gaze was steady, his words genuine. Despite the whirlwind nature of their relationship, she felt a strange sense of trust in him. Maybe it was because he had been honest about his own struggles, or maybe it was because he had been there for her when she needed someone the most. Either way, she decided to give him and their marriage a chance. The next few days were a blur of exploration and discovery. Elliot showed Charlotte around Las Vegas, taking her to hidden gems and local spots that most tourists overlooked. They laughed, shared stories, and began to learn more about each other. Charlotte found herself opening up about her past, telling Elliot about her career, her dreams, and the betrayal that had brought her to the city. Elliot listened intently, offering words of encouragement and support. But while Elliot was open about many things, there were parts of his life that he kept carefully guarded. He avoided questions about his family and his work, brushing them off with vague answers or changing the subject entirely. Charlotte noticed, but she didn't press him. She figured he would tell her when he was ready. That moment came sooner than she expected. On their fourth day as husband and wife, Elliot suggested they leave Las Vegas and head to Los Angeles. "There's something I need to show you," he said, his tone serious. Charlotte hesitated. "What is it?" Elliot took her hand, his blue eyes meeting hers. "I haven't been completely honest with you," he admitted. "There are things about my life that you don't know, things I should have told you before we got married." Charlotte's heart sank. She had known there was more to Elliot than he let on, but hearing him say it out loud made her stomach twist with anxiety. "What kind of things?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's better if I show you," he said. "But I need you to trust me." Despite her reservations, Charlotte agreed. They packed their bags and drove to Los Angeles, the tension between them growing with each passing mile. When they arrived, Elliot took her to a sprawling estate in Beverly Hills, a mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie. Charlotte's jaw dropped as they pulled up to the gates. "This is your house?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Elliot shook his head. "It's my family's house," he said. "Come on. There's someone I want you to meet." As they entered the mansion, Charlotte was struck by the opulence of it all. The marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and priceless artwork made her feel like she had stepped into another world. But the grandeur was overshadowed by the icy reception they received from the woman waiting for them in the foyer. "Elliot," the woman said, her tone sharp and disapproving. She was tall and elegant, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer dress that screamed wealth and power. Her piercing gaze shifted to Charlotte, and her lips curled into a faint sneer. "And who is this?" "This is Charlotte," Elliot said, his voice steady. "My wife." The woman's eyes widened in shock before narrowing in anger. "Your wife?" she repeated, her tone dripping with disdain. "Elliot, what have you done?" Charlotte felt a wave of unease wash over her. She had known Elliot's family would be wealthy, but she hadn't expected this level of hostility. She looked to Elliot for reassurance, but he seemed just as tense as she was. "Charlotte, this is my mother, Victoria Grayson," Elliot said, his voice tight. "Mom, this is Charlotte." Victoria didn't bother to hide her disapproval. "I see," she said coldly. "Well, I suppose we should talk." The conversation that followed was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of Charlotte's life. Victoria made it clear that she didn't approve of their marriage, questioning Charlotte's intentions and implying that she was only after Elliot's money. Charlotte tried to defend herself, but Victoria's sharp words and condescending tone left her feeling small and out of place. After what felt like an eternity, Elliot finally intervened. "That's enough, Mom," he said firmly. "Charlotte is my wife, and I won't let you treat her this way." Victoria's expression hardened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Elliot with a look of warning. "You've made your choice," she said, "but don't expect me to clean up the mess when it all falls apart." As they left the mansion, Charlotte felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of doubt. She had known marrying Elliot would come with challenges, but she hadn't anticipated the hostility of his family. She turned to him as they got into the car. "Why didn't you tell me about your family?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elliot sighed, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "Because I didn't want you to see me the way they do," he admitted. "To them, I'm just a tool, a way to expand the family's power and wealth. I've spent my whole life trying to prove that I'm more than that." Charlotte reached for his hand, her anger softening as she saw the pain in his eyes. "You don't have to prove anything to me," she said softly. "I married you because of who you are, not because of your family." Elliot looked at her, his expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "But there's more you need to know. My family isn't just wealthy, they're powerful, and there are people who will do anything to protect that power, even if it means coming after you." Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. She had thought she was leaving her troubles behind in New York, but it seemed she had stepped into an entirely new set of challenges. As they drove away from the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to become even more complicated. The days following their visit to the Grayson estate were tense. Charlotte couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her since meeting Victoria. Elliot had been honest about his family's wealth and influence, but she hadn't fully understood the weight of what that meant until now. The Graysons weren't just rich, they were powerful, and that power came with strings attached. Charlotte could feel the invisible threads tightening around her, pulling her into a world she didn't fully understand. Elliot, for his part, tried to shield her from the worst of it. He reassured her that they would face whatever challenges came their way together, but Charlotte could see the strain in his eyes. He was carrying the weight of his family's expectations, and now, by extension, so was she. One afternoon, as Charlotte was sketching designs in the sunlit living room of their temporary Los Angeles apartment, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Charlotte Hayes," a familiar voice drawled on the other end. Her stomach dropped. It was Ryan. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Relax," Ryan said, his tone smug. "I just wanted to congratulate you on your new arrangement. Married to a Grayson? Huh? That's quite the upgrade." Charlotte's grip on the phone tightened. "How do you know about that?" "Oh, word gets around," Ryan said casually, "especially when it involves one of the most powerful families in the country. You've really outdone yourself this time." Charlotte's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't trust Ryan, and the fact that he knew about her marriage to Elliot made her skin crawl. "What do you want, Ryan?" she demanded. "I want to help you," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "You think you've escaped, but you haven't. The Graysons aren't what they seem, Charlotte. They'll chew you up and spit you out, just like they've done to everyone else who's gotten in their way." Charlotte's mind raced. She didn't believe Ryan's sudden concern for her, but his words planted a seed of doubt. Before she could respond, Ryan continued. "Meet me," he said. "I'll explain everything. Tomorrow, noon, at the cafe on Melrose. Come alone." The line went dead before Charlotte could protest. She stared at her phone, her thoughts swirling. She didn't want to trust Ryan, but something about his tone had unsettled her. She decided not to tell Elliot, at least not yet. She needed to figure out what Ryan was up to before involving her husband. The next day, Charlotte arrived at the cafe, her nerves on edge. Ryan was already there, sitting at a table near the window with a smug smile on his face. He stood as she approached, gesturing for her to sit. "You look good," he said, his eyes scanning her. "Marriage suits you. Cut the small talk," Charlotte said, crossing her arms. "What do you want?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, his expression turning serious. "I want to warn you," he said. "The Graysons are dangerous, Charlotte. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their empire, and that includes getting rid of anyone they see as a threat." Charlotte frowned. "Why would they see me as a threat?" "Because you're an outsider," Ryan said. "You don't come from their world, and that makes you expendable. Trust me, I've dealt with people like them before. They'll smile to your face while plotting your downfall behind your back." Charlotte's stomach churned. She didn't want to believe Ryan, but his words echoed the cold reception she had received from Victoria. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "What's in it for you?" Ryan hesitated, his confident facade faltering for a moment. "Because I still care about you," he said quietly. "I know I messed up, but I don't want to see you get hurt." Charlotte stared at him, her emotions a mix of anger and confusion. She didn't trust Ryan, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he might be telling the truth. "If you're so concerned, then tell me what you know," she said. Ryan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Victoria Grayson has been digging into your past," he said. "She's looking for anything she can use against you, and she's not the only one. There's someone else, Isabel Harper. She's been close to Elliot for years, and she's not happy about you being in the picture." Charlotte's heart sank. She had heard Elliot mention Isabel in passing, but he had downplayed their relationship. Now it seemed there was more to the story. "What does Isabel want?" she asked. "She wants Elliot," Ryan said simply, "and she'll do whatever it takes to get him back." Charlotte felt a wave of anger and fear wash over her. She had thought she was leaving her troubles behind in New York, but it seemed she had walked straight into a new set of challenges. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ryan met her gaze, his expression earnest. "You don't have to," he said, "but don't say I didn't warn you." Charlotte left the cafe feeling more conflicted than ever. She didn't trust Ryan, but his words had struck a nerve. She decided it was time to confront Elliot. She couldn't keep this from him any longer. When she returned to the apartment, Elliot was in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening. "Hey," he said, "how was your day?" Charlotte hesitated, then took a deep breath. "We need to talk," she said. Elliot set the glass down, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong?" Charlotte told him everything, Ryan's call, their meeting, and the warnings he had given her. She watched as Elliot's expression shifted from concern to anger. "Ryan has no right to interfere in our lives," Elliot said, his voice tight. "He's just trying to manipulate you." "Maybe," Charlotte said. "But what about Isabel? Is what he said about her true?" Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Isabel and I were together a long time ago," he admitted. "It ended badly, and she's had a hard time letting go. But I promise you, Charlotte, you're the only one I care about." Charlotte wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered. "And your mother?" she asked. "Is she really digging into my past?" Elliot hesitated, and that hesitation was all the confirmation Charlotte needed. "She's protective," he said finally. "She doesn't trust easily, especially when it comes to people outside the family. But I'll talk to her. I won't let her hurt you." Charlotte nodded, but the unease in her chest remained. She had thought marrying Elliot would be a fresh start, a chance to leave her pain behind. But now, it seemed her new life was just as complicated as the one she had left behind. As she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. Charlotte couldn't ignore the growing weight of the warnings she had received, but she also didn't want to let fear dictate her life. She had chosen to marry Elliot, and despite the challenges, she wanted to believe in their relationship. Still, the cracks in their new marriage were beginning to show, and Charlotte knew they couldn't move forward without addressing the issues that had surfaced. Elliot, for his part, seemed determined to make things right. He spent more time at home, stepping away from his work to focus on their relationship. He planned quiet dinners, took Charlotte on long drives along the California coast, and even encouraged her to start sketching again. But, despite his efforts, Charlotte could sense the tension he was carrying. His family's disapproval, Isabel's lingering presence, and the weight of his own secrets were taking a toll on him. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment overlooking the city, Charlotte decided it was time to have an honest conversation. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the skyline, but the beauty of the moment did little to ease the knot in her stomach. "Elliot," she began, her voice soft but steady, "we need to talk." Elliot turned to her, his expression serious. "I know," he said. "I've been avoiding it, but you're right. We can't keep pretending everything is fine." Charlotte nodded, grateful for his honesty. "I need to know the truth," she said. "About your family, about Isabel, about everything. I can't keep feeling like I'm walking into a battle I don't understand." Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right," he said. "You deserve to know everything. But it's not an easy story to tell." He took a deep breath before continuing. "My family's wealth and power come with a price," he said. "The Graysons have built their empire on control over their businesses, their image, and even their relationships. My mother, Victoria, has always been the one pulling the strings. She expects absolute loyalty, and anyone who doesn't fall in line is seen as a threat." Charlotte listened intently, her heart sinking, as Elliot's words confirmed her worst fears. "And Isabel?" she asked. Elliot hesitated before answering. "Isabel was someone my mother approved of," he said. "She came from a powerful family, and our relationship was more of a business arrangement than anything else. But when I realized I didn't love her, I ended things. She didn't take it well, and my mother wasn't happy about it either. Isabel has been trying to win me back ever since, and my mother has been encouraging her." Charlotte felt a pang of anger and sadness. "So, when you married me," she began, her voice trailing off. "When I married you, I chose you," Elliot said firmly. "I knew it would upset my family, but I didn't care. You're the one I want to be with, Charlotte. But I won't lie to you. It's not going to be easy. My mother will do everything she can to push you out, and Isabel, she won't give up without a fight." Charlotte took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. She appreciated his honesty, but it didn't make the situation any less daunting. "I need to know that you're with me," she said, "that no matter what happens, we're in this together." Elliot reached for her hand, his blue eyes meeting hers. "I'm with you," he said. "Always." For the first time in days, Charlotte felt a flicker of hope. They still had a long way to go, but at least they were facing the challenges together. The next morning, Charlotte decided to take control of her own narrative. She had spent too much time feeling like a pawn in someone else's game, and it was time to reclaim her power. She threw herself into her work, sketching designs for a new collection that reflected her journey pieces that were bold, fearless, and unapologetically her. Elliot supported her every step of the way, even helping her secure a studio space in downtown Los Angeles, where she could bring her vision to life. But as Charlotte began to rebuild her career, the threats from Elliot's world continued to loom. One afternoon, as she was working in her studio, she received an unexpected visitor. Isabel Harper walked in, her presence commanding and intimidating. She was dressed impeccably, her sharp features accentuated by a confident smirk. "Charlotte," Isabel said, her tone dripping with condescension, "I thought it was time we had a little chat." Charlotte set down her sketchpad, refusing to let Isabel see her nerves. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady. "I want to make sure you understand your place," Isabel said, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Elliot and I have a history, one that you'll never be able to replace. You're just a distraction, a phase. He'll come back to me eventually." Charlotte's anger flared, but she kept her composure. "If you think you can intimidate me, you're wasting your time," she said. "Elliot made his choice, and it wasn't you." Isabel's smirk faltered for a moment before she regained her composure. "We'll see," she said. "But don't say I didn't warn you." As Isabel left, Charlotte felt a surge of determination. She wasn't going to let anyone, Isabel, Victoria, or anyone else, dictate her life. She had fought too hard to get where she was, and she wasn't about to back down now. That evening she told Elliot about Isabel's visit. He was furious, but Charlotte reassured him that she could handle it. "I'm not afraid of her," she said, "but I need to know that you're on my side." "I am," Elliot said, pulling her into his arms, "and I always will be." Together they began to strategize, finding ways to protect themselves from the forces working against them. Elliot confronted his mother, making it clear that he wouldn't tolerate her interference in their marriage. It was a tense conversation, but it marked a turning point in their relationship. For the first time, Elliot was standing up to his family, choosing Charlotte over their expectations. As the weeks went on, Charlotte and Elliot grew closer, their bond strengthened by the challenges they faced. Charlotte's new collection began to take shape, and she found herself rediscovering her passion for design. Elliot, too, began to open up more about his own struggles, sharing parts of himself that he had kept hidden for years. But even as they built a life together, the shadows of their pasts continued to linger. Charlotte knew that their journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like they were truly a team. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Months passed, and Charlotte's life began to take on a new rhythm. Her studio in downtown Los Angeles became her sanctuary, a place where she could pour her emotions into her work. The new collection she was designing was unlike anything she had ever created before. Bold, daring, and deeply personal. Each piece told a story of resilience, love, and transformation, reflecting the journey she had been on since leaving New York. The collection was set to debut at a high-profile fashion show, and the anticipation surrounding it was growing. Elliot, too, was finding his footing. He had distanced himself from his family's business, choosing instead to focus on projects that aligned with his own values. For the first time in years, he felt free to make his own decisions, unburdened by the expectations of the Grayson name. His relationship with Charlotte had become his anchor, and together they were building a life that felt authentic and true. But the challenges they had faced were not entirely behind them. Victoria Grayson had not given up her attempts to undermine their marriage, and Isabel Harper continued to linger on the edges of their lives, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Despite this, Charlotte and Elliot remained steadfast, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. The night of Charlotte's fashion show arrived, and the energy in the air was electric. The venue was packed with industry insiders, celebrities, and journalists, all eager to see the debut of her new collection. Charlotte stood backstage, her heart pounding as she watched the models prepare to walk the runway. Elliot was by her side, his presence a steadying force. "You've got this," he said, taking her hand. "This is your moment." Charlotte smiled, her nerves easing slightly. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "Thank you for believing in me." As the lights dimmed and the music began to play, Charlotte's designs came to life on the runway. The audience was captivated, their applause growing louder with each passing look. By the time the final model walked out, the room was on its feet, giving Charlotte a standing ovation. Tears filled her eyes as she stepped onto the runway to take her bow, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. After the show, Charlotte and Elliot attended the after-party, where they were surrounded by friends and well-wishers. For the first time in what felt like forever, Charlotte allowed herself to relax, basking in the glow of her success. But as the night wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Her instincts proved correct when Isabel appeared, her expression cold and calculating. She approached Charlotte with a glass of champagne in hand, her smile as sharp as a blade. "Congratulations," Isabel said, her tone dripping with insincerity. "You've certainly made a name for yourself." Charlotte met her gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm proud of what I've accomplished." Isabel's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Enjoy it while it lasts," she said, "because people like you don't stay on top for long." Before Charlotte could respond, Elliot appeared at her side, his arm slipping protectively around her waist. "Isabel," he said, his voice firm, "I think it's time for you to leave." Isabel's eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor. Charlotte let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, grateful for Elliot's support. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," Elliot said, his expression apologetic. "It's okay," Charlotte said, leaning into him. "She doesn't scare me anymore." The night ended on a high note, with Charlotte and Elliot returning home feeling closer than ever. As they sat together on the balcony, looking out at the city lights, Charlotte felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. "I never thought I'd get here," she said softly. "After everything that happened, I didn't think I'd ever feel this happy again." Elliot took her hand, his gaze filled with love. "You deserve this," he said. "You've worked so hard and you've overcome so much. I'm so proud of you." Charlotte smiled, her heart full. "I'm proud of us," she said. "We've been through so much, but we're still standing, and I know we can face whatever comes next." Elliot leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Together," he said, "always." As the weeks turned into months, Charlotte and Elliot continued to build their life together. Charlotte's fashion brand flourished, earning her recognition as one of the most innovative designers of her generation. Elliot found fulfillment in his new ventures, using his resources to support causes he cared about. And despite the challenges they had faced, their love only grew stronger. One morning, as they sat together in their sunlit kitchen, Charlotte reached for Elliot's hand. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Elliot looked at her, concern flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" he asked. Charlotte took a deep breath, a smile breaking across her face. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Elliot was silent, his expression one of pure shock. Then a wide grin spread across his face and he pulled her into his arms. "We're going to be parents," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Charlotte laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We are," she said, "and I can't wait to start this new chapter with you." As they held each other, the sunlight streaming through the windows, Charlotte felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her journey had been filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and challenges she never could have anticipated, but it had also brought her love, success, and a future she never thought possible. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly at peace. The months that followed were a whirlwind of joy, preparation, and reflection. Charlotte and Elliot embraced the news of their growing family with open hearts, and their bond deepened as they prepared for the arrival of their child. The challenges they had faced together, Victoria's disapproval, Isabel's schemes, and the weight of Elliot's family legacy, seemed to fade into the background as they focused on building a future filled with love and hope. Charlotte's career continued to soar. Her fashion brand became a household name, celebrated for its bold designs and empowering message. She used her platform to inspire others, sharing her story of resilience and transformation. Her journey from heartbreak to happiness resonated with people around the world, and she became a symbol of strength and perseverance. Elliot, too, found his purpose. He had stepped away from his family's business entirely, choosing instead to invest in projects that aligned with his values. He supported Charlotte's work wholeheartedly, often attending her events and cheering her on from the sidelines. But he also found fulfillment in philanthropy, using his resources to support causes close to his heart. Together, they became a power couple, admired not just for their success but for their unwavering commitment to each other. As Charlotte's due date approached, the couple decided to take a step back from their busy lives and focus on their growing family. They moved into a beautiful home in Malibu, a serene retreat overlooking the ocean. The house was filled with light and warmth, a perfect place to start this new chapter of their lives. One crisp autumn morning, as the waves crashed against the shore outside their home, Charlotte went into labor. Elliot was by her side every step of the way, holding her hand and offering words of encouragement. The hours were long and exhausting, but when their baby's first cries filled the room, all the pain and effort melted away. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the tiny, wriggling bundle into Charlotte's arms. Charlotte looked down at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. She was perfect, tiny fingers, soft tufts of dark hair, and the most beautiful little face Charlotte had ever seen. Elliot leaned over, his own eyes glistening with emotion, and kissed Charlotte's forehead. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "just like her mother." They named her Lily Grace, a name that symbolized new beginnings and the beauty of life. From the moment she entered the world, Lily became the center of their universe. Charlotte and Elliot poured their love into her, determined to give her a life filled with happiness, security, and the freedom to be whoever she wanted to be. Victoria Grayson, to everyone's surprise, softened after Lily's birth. Though she had been cold and distant throughout Charlotte and Elliot's marriage, the arrival of her granddaughter seemed to melt some of her icy exterior. She visited the family in Malibu, holding Lily with a tenderness that Charlotte hadn't thought possible. While their relationship was far from perfect, it was a step toward healing, and Charlotte was willing to give it a chance for Lily's sake. Isabel Harper, on the other hand, finally faded from their lives. After one last failed attempt to win Elliot back, she disappeared from their social circle, leaving Charlotte and Elliot to move forward without her shadow looming over them. It was a relief, and Charlotte felt a sense of closure knowing that chapter of their lives was truly over. As the years passed, Charlotte and Elliot's love only grew stronger. They faced life's ups and downs together, always supporting each other and finding joy in the little moments. Their home was filled with laughter, creativity, and the pitter-patter of tiny feet as Lily grew into a curious, spirited child. Charlotte often found herself sketching in her studio with Lily by her side, the little girl scribbling her own designs on scraps of paper. Elliot would watch them with a smile, his heart full as he saw the two people he loved most in the world sharing such a special bond. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, Charlotte and Elliot sat on the porch, watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard. The golden light bathed their home in a warm glow, and the sound of the waves provided a soothing backdrop to the scene. Charlotte leaned her head on Elliot's shoulder, a contented smile on her face. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked softly. Elliot nodded, his arm wrapping around her. "All the time," he said. "I think about how lucky I am to have found you. You've changed my life, Charlotte." Charlotte looked up at him, her eyes shining with love. "You've changed mine too," she said. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness, but here we are." Elliot kissed her gently, his lips lingering on hers. "Here we are," he echoed, "and I wouldn't trade it for anything." As they sat together, Watching their daughter play and the stars begin to twinkle in the sky, Charlotte felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her journey had been filled with twists and turns, heartbreak and healing, but it had all led her to this moment. She had found love, built a family, and created a life that was truly her own. And for the first time in her life, she felt complete.